What's going on, Digital Wildcatters? Welcome to another week of BDE. I have a upgrade to my co-host today, Mark Myers, in the building, replacing Chuck Yates. Chuck is up in New York. I've seen pictures
Wearing
of
a
him
collar.
wearing a collared shirt, which I'm just like, is that the Chuck I know? I don't know if I've ever.
Did you see the video of his dessert last night?
Yeah, I did, with like
Yeah, it
the
was in
flame on
flames.
it. Yeah, it's funny. One time I went to a institutional investor with Chuck, and we're wearing slacks and button downs, and it was like so obvious that we were out of character that the institutions like looked at Chuck and like, well, you're dressed up today. So anyways, got a good show lined up today, got lots to talk about. Man, where do we want to get into this? First, let's talk about Ukraine and Russia. Mark, you're really well versed when it comes to this type of stuff. I've been seeing a lot of stuff on Twitter about it's hard to tell what's real and what's not, what's propaganda and what's not, but it seems like Ukraine is really pushing Russia back. So let's talk about that and the implications that it has on energy.
Yeah, I think the numbers are the counteroffensive. I read something in the Washington Times yesterday. Jamie McIntyre, who was long covered the Pentagon on TV and in print, basically characterized this as the greatest counteroffensive since World War II. The numbers, and mostly in the Northeast, pushing all the way to the Russian border, suggests that they've reclaimed within the past 4 or 5 days 1,200 square miles. And since the counteroffensive began, that number I saw characterized as upwards of 2,300 square miles, or 2 Luxembourg. So this is an interesting turn of events.
People
right?
like me. Give me
2 Luxembourg.
Yeah, there you go.
right on the tip of your tongue. Is that a Liechtenstein? So I think this has got a lot of implications. Certainly puts Putin on his heels. We're not, and NATO is not out boldly declaring final victory, but means a lot going into the winter, in which I think Putin has a lot of plans to try and destabilize and demoralize NATO in terms of its support.
That's what I was going to say. I mean,
for Ukrainian independence.
It's kind of peculiar timing coming into winter. Obviously, Russia has leverage with nat gas supply. Did you see this commercial last week of oh man, I can't remember the energy company in Russia, but they put out this commercial. It's an official commercial from the energy company, and it shows a nat gas meter going from pressured up to no pressure, and essentially he's like, good luck, winter's coming. Yeah, meant to scare Europe. Did you see that?
I did not see that.
I didn't see it either. No one was talking about it. The only reason I saw it is because a friend sent it over to me, and it's like, dude, what the fuck is this? And anyways, I saw
propaganda, and part of this in the backdrop is that the propaganda is ratcheting up. In fact, not in the category of propaganda, you had a retired Russian parliament member, the name escapes me, commenting on conjecturing as to whether it might be time to start peace discussions. So things clearly are not going as well in 200 days in. And look, I think the plan was, in terms of getting into winter and holding gas hostage, that Russia would at least be able to hold the line. And so making a choice in some particularly energy-strapped European, particularly continental countries, as to whether or not they had the resolve to continue to support Ukrainian independence or wanted to be warm and eat. So
yeah, I think that if things continue the way that they're going, it doesn't look bright for Europe coming into winter, but it just seems like what's happening over there could have some pretty big implications for the next coming months. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what progresses or what actually happens over there.
And I mean, there's always a wild card of what he will do next.
Yeah, for sure.
Not the most rational actor on the global stage.
Yeah,
over the last
and
2 decades.
Speaking of Europe and Germany and all these places, saw something about. It's funny when you talk about energy and supply chain, like you just think like in the source commodities, whether it's natural gas or oil or whatever it may be, coal. But I saw Germany actually may have a chance of running out of DEF fluid, which stands for diesel emission fluid. And we can talk about that a little bit. But what is that like? what are the implications there? I mean, I'm sure
Well,
Germany has way stricter standards than we do when it comes to diesel motors, and a lot of vehicles over in Europe are diesel.
well,
So
the key components of AdBlue, it's a diesel additive, so commercial truckers put it in with every tankful, I believe. It's basically 1/3 urea and 2/3 deionized water. In fact, I saw that tweet. I think it was sourced out of Bloomberg, but people were replying to the tweet and saying, "Well, they ought to just ought to just piss in their tanks," and that takes care of the problem. But on a more serious note, the immobilization of the trucking fleet, because as I understand, some of these commercial trucking fleets actually have kill switches in the trucks that don't allow operation because of the NOx risk from burning diesel. You remember the old black clouds that would come out of the stack
yeah, I
on a
remember, dude.
diesel
I'm
truck, really
redneck.
looking cool.
I'm a redneck. We roll coal.
Yeah. So just another stress point in the in the components of fertilizer supply chain and all the different things that they're used for.
Yeah, Jay commented and said "death fluid is dog piss," and like literally, it is. It's just this clear fluid. It looks like water. And when you go to truck stops, they have DEF along with diesel, and you can fill up your DEF. And I worked out in the oil field when legislation passed that you had to be running DEF on diesel trucks, and it was a big problem. I think this was back like 2013 timeframe. Wireline trucks, for instance, like Mark, you've been out in the field. When you run diesel equipment in trucks,
Before DEF.
yeah, you idle and you
Right.
never turn your truck off. Like it just sits there and runs. And it started becoming a problem because what happens is that these trucks essentially go into regeneration mode and they'll dump a bunch of DEF fluid in there. And so all of that black smoke that used to get emitted get caught in this filter. It dumps DEF fluid in there and essentially burns it. And you'd have to let your truck go in regen mode. And sometimes your truck would just shut down and you couldn't operate. And it became the biggest pain in the ass, and really actually changed the way that diesel trucks were operated out in the field. And you talk to any field hand, like everyone hates
Everybody
DEF
hates
systems.
DEF.
Yeah. So, but you look over at like Germany, I mean, there's such a cultural difference between Europe and America when it's come to diesel. I mean, their cars have diesel motors. A lot of people drive diesel engines. And so everyone over there is using DEF. So I'm sure you go over there, everyone knows what DEF is. You come over to America and only truck drivers know what DEF is.
My analogy is catalytic converters. I remember that when I was a kid. Everybody complained about it, and now they're essentially worth their weight in gold.
Oh yeah. Now you got to worry about the meth
I had to
heads.
replace two.
Yeah.
So.
I was gonna say, now you got to worry about the meth heads cutting them off in the mall parking lot. So just kind of, talking about some of the potential things in supply chain. You're also telling me about a potential rail strike, which I didn't see this. So school me up on that real quick.
Yeah, I picked up on this yesterday. Apparently, the rail workers in the U.S. are threatening to strike come Friday, and there's about 90,000 in the rail workforce. And the primary issue, if you think about how trains run today, it's usually a crew of two. But unfortunately, those two-person crews are essentially on 7 days a week call.
Yeah.
So you've got no relief from the stress of being called out in, I would argue, a fairly critical part of the country's logistical network. And so just a few stats: 75% of finished vehicles from factories to dealership are delivered by rail. You've got a third of fertilizer that moves in this country by rail, and about 50% of grain exports, which we already know because of the fertilizer shortages, because of mandates to outlaw or prohibit the use of chemical fertilizers, creating some potential for food shortages and inflation. And of course, the all important things, Amazon and UPS packages, a rail car will handle about 2,000 of those. So
yeah,
you remember what happened in the port of LA, the rail port of LA, when there was a big disruption.
Yeah.
So
have you seen this thing? That just reminded me. There's been this thing on Instagram. I can't remember if it's in Memphis or where it's at. I think it's Memphis, but the trucks backed up to Nike factory, got ransacked, and all of these off market Nike shoes got stolen. And so supply chain logistic robbery, it's kind of like Fast and Furious style, where these people are robbing trains and trucks.
I spent a couple of summers working in high school and in college working for a grain inspection service, and we had to sample every truck that came into the elevator. And then when we got the dreaded call that there were 300 rail cars out in the baking, no shade rail yard, we had to go walk that whole line of cars. You just don't, rail transportation, what it means in terms of logistics and supply chain, is always in the background. Yeah, you get annoyed when you get stopped by a rail crossing trying to get somewhere, but just a little fun fact: it would take 457,000 new trucks or additional trucks every day to offset a nationwide rail stoppage.
The traffic
and
backup
they probably couldn't get
AdBlue.
AdBlue. So
and they can't get their DEF fluid. Yeah, it is kind of wild to think about how vital the rail system is. I mean, look, this country was really built on the rail system, but nowadays in modern life, like if you live here in Houston, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. Back home in West Texas, I mean, you see the trains running through, and you named a few products that are delivered, but think about coal deliveries, oil, things of that nature. I mean,
the chemical transport that you see.
Yeah. So we'd be pretty fucked if we didn't have people running the trains. And kind of sympathetic to those guys, but also oil and gas runs 24/7. That's just kind of that's what comes with the territory. So stop being soft and just go run the fucking trains.
And Congress does apparently have the leeway to step in and stop a strike.
Yeah. We got a comment says this is why pipelines are so important. I mean, yeah, not only just making sure that we're able to deliver it, but pipelines are just much safer than rail car too. So we should be pushing pipelines. That's preaching to the choir here in this audience. But yeah, so that man, I mean, you think about the supply chain constraints that we've already had and how bad it's it's not as bad as it was. Like, remember trying to get stuff like last year, just trying to order stuff, like you couldn't find anything, and it seems like that's gone away a little bit. Like,
it has.
Remember, like, we couldn't find microphones for the podcast, like just anything that you tried to order you couldn't get. And I think that's gone away, but hopefully that this doesn't add on to it. Do you think that this has any impacts on like gasoline prices or anything like that, or is most product just transferred by pipeline and anything that this touches will be minimal?
Well, I think to the extent that there are inputs to gasoline refining that arrive by rail, I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I think a nationwide rail strike would be, something that would propagate through certainly all sectors. I think the economic loss is estimated at like $2 billion a day if a nationwide strike were to shut down rail traffic. So it's not insignificant.
$2 billion a day. That's kind of wild. You can't even wrap your head around what that actually means. So we'll have to keep tabs on that and see what happens.
So we were talking earlier. It seems like there's a catalyst or two with the Inflation Reduction Act.
Yeah. So it's funny because you and I were talking last week, and then a few other conversations that I've had. I mean, look, the IRA was big bill, right? And so it's taken a long time to unpack and actually see what it means. But one thing that I've been hearing consistently is the catalyst for hydrogen production. So do you want to dive in a little bit to what the IRA is doing for hydrogen, and we can go from there?
Yeah, the one provision that I studied a little bit was for green hydrogen, and the hydrogen had to be generated, as I understand it, by either nuclear or defined renewables energy, which to me implies the electrolysis process. The vast majority of hydrogen today for industrial use is generated by steam reforming methane.
Yeah. So let's Yeah, let's unpack that a little bit because I actually had two hydrogen production companies on oil and gas startups. So all of a sudden, I'm a fucking
We'll call
mastermind in
you
hydrogen
H2.
production. I'm being sarcastic there for anyone that didn't pick up on that. But, anyways, hydrogen, these processes, they use electricity. It's kind of like go listen to our podcast with Omium. I think it just came out this week. Literally explains the process and how it's almost like a reverse fuel cell and uses electricity to produce hydrogen. And so my take on the IRA was if you could produce hydrogen using renewable clean electricity, then you would qualify for these subsidies,
And it's up to $3 a kilogram.
which is a lot.
Yeah, and it goes. There's a sliding scale down to 60 cents a kilogram.
Like, I got to imagine these companies that come on my show. I mean, both of them say that they can make it for under $1.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty wide spread there.
The CO2 limit is 4 kilograms of CO2 per kilogram of hydrogen generated. I think, and the podcast may reveal a different take or a different set of facts. I think that pretty much that provision is confined to electrolysis,
Yeah.
which uses water and doesn't generate CO2 or very much, as opposed to the steam reforming of methane, which creates both a fugitive methane issue on the input, but also generates CO2 as a result of the process. I'm wondering if blue hydrogen will ever find its way into that mix of considered, something equivalent to green, where the CO2 is permanently sequestered. So if you think about all of the vast EOR projects or the CO2 use and the sequestration potential in places like West Texas and offshore, will we get a closed loop where the CO2 is kind of out of the atmosphere, is not emitted, and then further spur that? I think um, think about more of the system issues going forward, and that is what is the logistical infrastructure needed to then make it viable as a kind of a nationwide solution.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting set
John
of
Mink
issues.
John Mink commented and he said that's a lot of renewables you need to make hydrogen, and it is for sure. One thing that was really interesting to me about the podcast that I recorded with Omium was, I think Chuck and I have talked the last few weeks on the show about this, about co-location of renewable energy assets with factories or manufacturing plants. And one thing that I kind of just had my eyes open to on that podcast was the inputs needed to make steel, and going from fossil fuels to hydrogen. And you can literally co-locate these renewable assets, whether it's hydro or solar or wind, with the steel manufacturing plant, and produce hydrogen right there on site as inputs. And I mean, a bulk of world emissions come from the process of making steel. And so I thought that was super interesting.
So, sidebar, I read something last week that said if we are to meet our whatever the kind of generally accepted framework of EV penetration globally, that steel and cement production capacity will have to go up somewhere between 20 and 30 fold. And that brings its own set of abatement issues. What do you're a West Texas guy. What do you think about all this co-location and what it may mean for manufacturing?
I'm actually going to write up a whole blog post.
It's sunny and the wind blows,
yeah,
right?
No, I'm going to write up a blog post because I have this vision for West Texas. I mean, West Texas is a fucking powerhouse. And so, one, if you look at the space industry, Midland, it has been trying to really set the area as a stage for space exploration. And it's why you have Blue Origin launching down to Big Bend. Back in the day, we had some failed. Can't not remember the space company's name, but Midland gave them $10 million to relocate their headquarters from California to Midland. But I mean, you have 300 days plus of sunshine. You have every major energy source, whether it's oil, gas, solar, wind, and you have the talent and the blue collar work ethic to become a manufacturing hub. And so I can't tell you how bullish I am on West Texas's ability to co-locate manufacturing and production with these energy assets.
It's going to require hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of acres to do these co-located at scale.
You're not doing this up in the Northeast.
With the power generation you're going to need to drive an electrolysis process, or those high energy intensity manufacturing operations.
Yeah, I'm getting off this podcast and I'm going and buying land out in West Texas. And so CM, that's what I'm gonna call you because that's my initials. So I'm just gonna abbreviate your name. Said methane reduction is big in the IRA as well, but there's little discussion outside of monitoring. It's funny. So Oilfield Rando, who's on Twitter, which
he's a great follow.
I love this dude. And he's a roughneck, but his shtick is he will sit down and read every bill line by line. And he sends me a message. He's like, hey, check out page 246 paragraph. I'm like, this guy's 250 pages deep in this bill. But he was telling me, he's like, there's huge subsidies around methane reduction that could be used by Bitcoin mining. He's like, also a lot of subsidies around P&A of orphan wells. And so there's actually a lot in oil and gas too. So if you're interested in that stuff, go check out page 246 of IRA.
I think it aligns very well with what companies are increasingly putting into their specific targets, long-term compensation, incentive plans, with respect to things that they have, certainly a direct influence over and a responsibility. And I think most companies are, certainly on board with that. But fugitive methane emissions, and as we've talked in the more distant past ad nauseum about flaring, but there's a lot for everybody, it seems, and we'll continue to rely on footnote reader.
I had he just plays such an interesting character. There's also someone, John, I think it was John that left this comment. Yeah, John said that could work in West Texas, just need a water source. That's obviously a barrier out in the middle of the desert. But there's a cool startup that was on oil and gas startups. And they are, if you look at the states of matter, you have liquid, solids, gas, but the fourth state is plasma. And they're actually using plasma to dissociate H2S molecules and produce hydrogen from those H2S molecules. And so you go put that out on a refinery and you take this waste, this H2S, and you produce hydrogen and loop it back in as inputs. That shit's cool as fuck to me, man.
There is a lot of interesting emerging sour gas treatment technology that's coming to fruition that I think we're going to see more of.
Yeah.
Particularly as supply gets tighter and rig count stays disciplined.
Yeah. The thing for me is I'm pro energy, and I think that technology solves all problems. Like, that's who I am at my core. And so when you look at the nexus of oil and gas and sustainability, and a lot of these technologies are being developed by people from oil and gas.
Right.
I mean, that's like, I think that that's super cool. And especially like the H2S problem, like, look, H2S is a fucking problem in oil and gas, both from a technical perspective and an economic perspective. Now you got people literally developing technologies that are cutting edge. I mean, talking to Redshift, it's like we've used plasma in really dumb ways, like plasma TVs, plasma torches. Like, it's not smart ways of using plasma.
It's like the 198 million hours a day on TikTok.
Yeah. Yeah. If Mark and I were talking about how much time people spend on TikTok, 198 million hours a day. I'm 8 hours a day of those. But another thing that I wanted to talk about real quick, and I was looking up to see if I had any information on it. And I wasn't prepared today, so I don't. But I saw.
I'm going to tease it for next week.
Yeah, I'll just use it for next week. The amount of investments that are coming into manufacturing in the United States that are a direct result of the IRA. Like I saw Samsung is building out a I don't know if it was an EV battery manufacturing plant or something around lithium, but I think that, just on the conversation of talking about manufacturing and co-locating, like you're starting to see manufacturing come back to the
So,
United
so,
States.
so there have been 4 battery deals announced since the IRA was passed, and then 2 before it. You have Before it, you had GM and LG, and then you have Stellantis and Samsung. Stellantis is the parent of Chrysler, and then you've got Honda, LG, which we talked about a couple of weeks ago when I was last on. VW, Mercedes, Panasonic, and then Tesla with its Canadian venture for battery production. I haven't seen a price tag for any of these under like $2.5 billion, and some are as high as 4.5 to 5.
Yeah, I
So
mean, we're
we're
talking
talking
about
about
serious
massive
capex here.
capital.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's you can talk shit about government all you want. I'm one of those people, but you see stuff like that, and I mean, there's a direct correlation between the passing of the IRA, which I think we need to change the name of that bill. Like, just does not make
Yeah.
sense. But seeing, I'm very bullish on the United States becoming a nation that can build in manufacturing and producing things, and so I like seeing these announcements that we're starting to do that.
Well, the thing that I think we have to get back to being more thoughtful about and more realistic about is just the production of raw materials in the supply chain, because we do have a lot of vulnerabilities today, and things that we have stopped doing over decades since the 70s in the United States, mining chief among them. And all of this is extremely mining dependent and mining intensive.
Yeah.
That's a whole other show and a whole
Yeah.
other topic. But
Unfortunately, all these topics are so complex that we can't pack them into a 30-minute show.
NIMBY has turned into banana, which is built absolutely nothing anywhere near anyone.
Yeah.
Or something like that. So it's I think that will come as we look at what has been pretty significant incidents where we see just how vulnerable we are in the West to supply chain disruption and geopolitics.
Yeah.
Right. So
yeah,
we certainly have the know-how, and these are all very good paying jobs as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I laugh when I hear that the green jobs, like clean energy jobs, are good paying, because that's just a bullface lie. Like, they don't pay like oil field does, but manufacturing does. So
well, nuclear as well. I saw a piece on Palisades. Whitmer has done a reversal in Michigan for restarting Palisades, which is part of the Northern Entergy grid.
Yeah.
And I know this because I'm on MISO and not ERCOT. But I think there were like 400 permanent jobs associated
where do you
with
live
that
at that you're on
facility.
MISO?
It's a quirk of the 1930s design of the reliability councils. And so on each border of the state, you have incursion by MISO from the east coming in from Louisiana.
I was gonna say it's on the east coast.
So there's this peninsula that comes in from Louisiana that is MISO, that captures.
Gotcha.
Literally, if you go south of the main thoroughfare, south of where I live in the Woodlands, you're in ERCOT.
Yeah, it's just funny that I forgot that you live that far.
So
like
South Dallas.
Like, yeah, we live in separate places.
Right. So finishing the point on Palisades and jobs, the average wage or the average compensation for those 400 jobs is $117,000 a year.
Yeah.
Right? So these are highly skilled, high paying positions.
Yeah.
That, it's great to see that decision result in, some staying power for.
Yeah, some good jobs. Yeah. That's what I hate about the government. Like, they'll tout job growth, and it's all just job programs like TSA or hiring 80,000 agents at the IRS. So got to talk about real legitimate qualified jobs.
Not to get you off on, kind of sharing the public wealth, but U.S. News and World Report's ranking of universities came out yesterday.
Yeah.
Out of the top 20, 19 cost $55,000 a year or more.
Yeah. It's just not
amazing.
Cheap. It's just not cheap.
So
There's gonna
putting
be
people back to work at a nuclear plant that are looking to pay for their child's education,
yeah,
in the next generation is probably a good thing.
I agree. And CM said we focus too much on software development. That's really put a short circuit on building hardware in the USA because investors aren't really willing to invest hardware. Spot on, man.
Yep.
All they want is SaaS. They aren't interested in hard tech. So hopefully, we're gonna change that.
Yeah, and I would just comment, having sat in a chair that was about technology development within oil and gas, there is a lot of good hardware potential.
Oh yeah. Before we end the show, I'm gonna put in a plug because I'm calling this. So someday when I'm rich enough to not give a shit, I'm starting a fund. And the fund's going to be called That Shit Won't Work Fund. And it's going to be investing in deep tech and hardware and things that just have like no chance of making it. All right, we got to wrap up this show, but real quick, we have a very solid finger of the week. I'm going to show the clip here in a minute. Mark, who is the finger of the week? What's the group's name?
They are a climate and animal justice organization. They claim global presence, but out of the UK, called Animal Rebellion. And this month has been about stopping delivery of dairy in the UK through essentially vandalism.
All right. So watch this clip real quick so you guys can have some context. All right, Mark, I don't know if you have ever spent time around semi-truck trailers, but drilling through the sidewall of a semi-truck trailer is it takes some balls. So I respect them in that capacity because I'm not going to go take a drill bit. Like, I'm going to replay this clip real quick. Watch this girl at the very beginning. She drills through and her hair blows back. Like, this is how much pressure is on this. So yeah,
funny you should mention that. And another summer job experience I first learned. A friend of mine took a job at a truck stop in Corpus Christi, and they changed tires, changed flats. Have you ever seen the flat changing apparatus in a truck stop?
Yeah,
it's got a cage around it.
Yeah,
for a reason.
Yeah,
I mean, that's like
dude, the guys
diffusing a bomb.
No, the guys that I respect are the ones out in West Texas that'll come out and change your truck tire on the side of a road.
Right.
I'm like, man, that is a tough job. So anyways, these animal activist groups, they want to stop the shipment of dairy. I think their goal is to stop dairy production over the next month. And also, I think they had something in their tire.
They've hit 7 distribution centers with this type of vandalism. And the larger point is that, any of this debate is not advanced constructively through destruction and certainly vandalism.
Did you ever see that video where there's the activists and they're stopping a truck and like they're on top of it and they've disabled this truck and the news is out there reporting and they're interviewing this guy and the guy's like, yeah, but why are they doing it? And the reporter's like, because they want to stop oil transportation. He's like, yeah, I get that, but that's cooking oil in that truck. And so that's like one of my all-time favorite clips.
Now, in a European situation that is more on the front lines of dealing with severe inflation impacts, you've just got a number of issues that are impacting upon the European rank and file or the average citizen. And so, a staple for lower income like dairy products for children and nutrition, to disrupt that is just, that's just, it's unhelpful to the to the resolution.
Yeah, I mean, these are not productive
right
people that build. But all right, guys, that's the end of the show. John Mink, he thought the plug was the fuse plug. It wasn't the fuse plug, but here's the fuse plug. Get your tickets to Fuse coming up in October. We want to see you guys there. Appreciate y'all coming in, tuning into the show today. As always, please share with a friend. Helps us out a lot. And we will catch y'all next week, 10:30 a.m. Central Time Tuesday. Mark, thanks for joining me. We'll see you guys next week.
Thanks for